अंग्रेज तो इंडिया छोड़ के चले गए, but GB को यहाँ छोड़ गए. So my English was great, my Hindi was horrible. There will be rejection, okay? There will be rejection in again everything that you do. So again, it's just if you run from it, which is going to be, you're just always going to be running. People are going to call you, crazy. You're going to lose some friends. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. And a couple of them walked up to me after and they said, "Bhai, tere andar kuch hai."
All right, so welcome everyone to today's yet interesting session on Success Talks, where we have somebody truly special for each one of you here today. Somebody who's going to speak to us about finding your true why, finding out that what is it that we are meant to do in this world to really live the mission that we want to. And it's going to come from no other than somebody who's an expert in this field in finding out their true passion and now being able to align with it as well. We have Gaurav Bhagat with us. So welcome, Gaurav. Thank you so much for coming in today's session. And it's going to be all about, really wanting to understand that, it comes right from the very beginning on what you would have studied and then pursued for years and years after that. And if I'm correct to highlight this here, we're really going back to almost about 25 years plus in terms of, talking about an experience. And we're really going to try and carve out that journey, from your life. So first of all, thank you so much for coming in. And we're going to get started with this right away.
Yeah, thank you, Gopika, first of all, for having me and been following your work over the years and looking forward to the conversation for sure.
Lovely. So it's going to be a pleasure as well. So Gaurav, I'm really intrigued to understand that, I've seen you grow as an individual and as a professional through LinkedIn posts a lot, whereby it really talks about the journey from somebody who was completely into handling clients from a corporate perspective, which means that I'm into sales and I have a firm. I'm
Yep.
into gifting, and I'm going to be talking about consortium gifts, which is where Gaurav has been handling this for more than 25 years plus, and it's completely leading in the space of corporate gifting and thereby creating these employee engagement programs and much more.
Right.
But having said that, what I was really intrigued was that something that you have pursued as your work line for years and years together. And today we, of course, see your work in the space of training, coaching, and consulting. How did this come along from something so different?
Yeah, thank you for that. And when I do go back to, and this would be going back to maybe 2000 and 17. So we're talking about 7 years ago. And I recall I was taking a flight from Delhi to Bagdogra, and one of the books I was reading at that time was Simon Sinek's Start with Why. Right. And lo and behold, the thought really became, okay, I had built this company from scratch. It's a company that consortium, had been built from home with 10,000 rupees drawn on a credit card, of course, a long, long time back. And at that time, we were already scaling to becoming, one of the largest players in the country. And the thought really is that, was I perhaps meant to do something more? And, the seed was sown there. And then a month or so later, I'm at an event in Hyderabad. It's a BNI event. I flipped the book over, and the book says, there was an ad, and it said Tony Robbins is coming to Asia for the first time. And I'm like, interesting. I had some free time. I said, let me fly down to Singapore and attend the event. And on day 3 of that event, Simon, Tony Robbins is actually talking about your limiting beliefs and what's kind of holding you back. And the thought process then was the fact that, maybe I've held on to my company too tight. I mean, maybe I haven't, delegated enough and let go enough. And maybe I need to just start, doing that. And 2 weeks later, I'm in Las Vegas. I'm attending a Grant Cardone event. I'm not supposed to meet him, but I meet him, and he just gets chatting, and he says, "Dude, you're a guy who's been selling all your life. You've been using my programs. You've used it to double, your top line of your company. Why don't we look at licensing?" And he didn't know what it was. I didn't know what it was. But that's how the conversation moved forward. And lo and behold, a few months later, I'm actually Grant Cardone's first licensee in Asia, obviously in India as well.
Oh my God, as fast as you would have actually spoken about these experiences, I want to share this with everyone today that, it's actually a gamut of a complete series of experiences where we are speaking about meeting up Tony Robbins. We are talking about the interaction with Grant Cardone, so somebody who's been into the space of sales and is looked at as the father of talking about and speaking about, speaking on sales. And Gaurav bringing him and his kind of work so that, we can spread the same message in India. Now, this wasn't small, right? And this was an initiative that wasn't really aligned as much with consortium gifting, but a lot to do with your training and consulting. Then, how were you able to get into this domain of training and
Yeah.
consulting rather than doing something very different that you were doing for so many years?
So anyone who'd known me, and I'm talking about going back maybe about 12 or 13 years, I was perhaps the quietest, most introverted person, in any room, I mean, irrespective of how big that room really was. And from there to today, going to a space where I can speak on any stage at any time, at just impromptu, like a drop of a hat, and I can like actually take on that conversation. So I think a big role for that was actually the credit for that has to go to BNI, and I joined BNI as a member now 12 years ago. And they gave me small exposure. First, take an ed slot. An ed slot is a 5 minute, a presentation that you do. Then they asked me to lead the chapter. And when I did that, they're like, people started seeing me a little differently. I think my confidence kind of went up. I remember there was one training that happened, and I was just asked to come in, and it was a big training, leadership training, maybe 150, 160 people in the room. And the first time I was given a 5 minute slot, and there were a couple of, pro trainers who were sitting in the back of the room, and a couple of them walked up to me after, and they said, Bhai, tere andar kuch hai. Right? If you actually would pursue this, it could lead to something bigger. So all of these things were kind of happening. Maybe it was, you could call it a calling perhaps. And now we're talking about, 2015, 16. So way before, any of the coaching training space conversation that even started, but these kind of things were just happening, so who knows, maybe it was just meant to be.
It was just meant to be. So, are we really talking about Gaurav being an introvert who wouldn't face a big crowd? Was there a phase like that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, even now, I mean, some who would know me would probably put me as a situational extrovert. So when I have to, I will, break into that avatar where I can, go out there and like I said, be a charming, energetic speaker. But there are times where I'll just be, fairly, quiet. And I think if you did a psychometric profile, like a disc on me, I'd probably come across as a high D, high S. So I mean, I can be a high D when I need to be, but I'm probably a high S who just kind of reserved and, stays back in his shell as well, at times as well. So yeah.
So, Gaurav, a lot of people say that you're either born with it, which means the ability to articulate and being able to present it well, or you're not, right? And it's not about really developing it for yourself. Do you think that's true?
It's interesting that you bring that up because even in the space of sales, there are people who'd come to me and say, I'm a born salesperson. Now I'm like, you know what? There's no such thing as a born salesperson. Even Grant Cardone doesn't call himself a born salesperson. Even he struggled all the way to the age of 26. I struggled, till maybe I was in my late teens, early 20s as well in that domain. And that's sales. In terms of, speaking and being, someone who is able to go out on stages. I mean, sure, you can have the gift of the gab, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will be able to move an audience, connect with your audience, empower all the things that you do so well. I think it's something, and you probably agree, it comes with training, comes with practice, comes with hours and hours of recording oneself and practice and criticism and coaching. It's these things that lead to it. So when someone says I'm born with the skill, I said, okay, maybe you have a gift, but that
Yeah.
gift still needs a little bit of honing and polishing before you can actually perfect the art.
Not only a little bit, probably a lot, right? And that's something that we would want to first of all give it away. So, what would be your first, a quick, actionable tip that you'd like to share for somebody, who would want to get into the space of speaking, and today, like the way that we see you today, you can probably at the drop of a hat, you can speak anywhere.
Right.
What do you think would be an actionable tip for somebody who's listening to this?
I think again, it would be important to have your why in place, in terms of why would you want to do it? Is it because, it's fashionable, or is it because you're looking to build your brand? Is it because you have a message to communicate? Because in the end, you always have to come back to why, because there will be times where you will not get the response you want. Your motivation levels will dip, and I always say motivation is the villain of your piece. There'll be rejection and there'll be criticism. So all of these things will happen, and I think at that point, you know, for a lot of coaches, trainers, and speakers, I think this stage comes where they say, "Chodo yaar, nahi karna." Like
Hmm. Hmm.
we go back to do something else and all of that. So I think it's very important to know why. money cannot be a why. When someone comes and says, "Oh, I'm doing it for the money," I'm like, "Boss, designated to fail, like 100%." The money can be a byproduct of, but it cannot be your purpose or your why. So I think if there's a message, if there's some people that you want to move, if there's that impact that you want to have, if there's a story that you have within you that you want to, spread out, if there is people that you want to empower, move the needle, I think those are powerful drivers.
And I've
And
seen that, you've also started to really narrate a lot of times now, not only in English, but being able to use Hindi. And that was much later when you actually realized that, the best way to be able to connect to people, if you really want to get your message across, could also be a different language altogether. But then, I find a completely different section altogether who says that English is my language. So then, what is it that we need to really talk about here is that how do we overcome this barrier in our mind?
right. So it's interesting because when I was, growing up and I would go to, school and my parents were called in and they said, लगता है कि अंग्रेज तो इंडिया छोड़ के चले गए, but GB को यहाँ छोड़ गए. So my English was great. My Hindi was horrible. I would almost, always fail. And, hence there was this stage where I realized I want to kind of get out of my comfort zone. And while English is obviously something I was very comfortable with, I'm like, यार हिंदी में try करते हैं. And there's one company that reached out to us and they said that, we have 80 people and we need to train them, but Hindi में training करनी पड़ेगी. And I said, कर लेंगे यार. And they're like, पर आपकी हिंदी तो, बहुत ही बेकार है. I said, सुधार लेंगे यार. So, then did things like, watched, YouTube videos, started having more conversations with my staff in Hindi and the likes. And I think really, I mean, if one really has to reach out to the masses, you have to, get out of that comfort zone and you have to do the Hindi route. I have friends, who are content creators, and while they were delivering in English, they did okay. But when they went to Hindi, they went 100x. Okay, not even 10x. Their audience grew 100x, and they mastered it. So again, I think that if one really needs to make that impact, I mean, there is no taking away that. That's the language you have to take. And of course, if you can either even go like further regional, and if you're like from down south and you want to do Tamil and the likes, go for it. But English on its own, you kind of may have people saying वाह वाह अच्छा बोलते हैं, but you will not have grassroots impact. So if that's your thing, then you got to go regional.
Yeah, so I totally I think relate to this because as narrated by you itself that somebody came and told you that आप में तो कोई बात है, and the way that they said it was, of course, because it's about the content, you're right, and the message with the intention that you're wanting to convey and the way that you're able to reach out with it, irrespective of the language that you're being able to use. And that's something that, I have seen very closely while you speak about sales. So I see that there is an alignment, right, with it, which is what you have done in the past for about 25 years, which is
Yeah.
with consortium gifts. So you were doing a lot of and really making this work for you in terms of a company becoming, financially doing extremely well and doing that as a part of developing as a skill set and then taking that in the form of training. So is that how was it like one fine day that you suddenly found when you met Grant Cardone that this is what I'm going to now get into, or was it like building up?
Yeah, so I think two or three things happened, and you and I, we both know, Paritosh as well, and Paritosh is someone who brought me into BNI, many years ago, and prior to going across and meeting Grant, he had also mentioned. I said, "Oh, this conversations, happening. I might be considering." He says, "Listen, you need those couple of elements, and one is obviously the depth." And he says, "Choose, what is your expertise, like what is the area that you're best in." And for me, I mean, yes, sales. And again, sales didn't happen easy. There was a lot of rejection. I was thrown out of so many offices, back in the day, made so many mistakes. Life was a struggle. I mean, if I started this company when I was 19, 20. I mean, till the age of 26, 27, it was
Hmm.
almost, looking like, okay, I don't know if you're going to get through, this, this next week, this next month. And so it took a while, but, so that really was the area that, I had depth. And I know with GC, because we were using him for my company, I knew his certification, his license, his mentorship, his guidance, working with his team, that would take to the next, level as well. So the depth was there, the certification was there. And of course, what I knew I brought to the table was intention. So the D plus C plus I. So hence I knew this is it. I know a lot of times, people have said, GB, why don't you pivot? Ye bhi coach kar lo, wo bhi kar lo. Aaj to training mein, all rounder hote hain. I'm like, dude, I said, I'm a specialist. This is what I bring to the table. I may have, other areas that I kind of, excel in, which could be things like, habits, for example, because I'm also certified by BJ Fogg. and disc, which is on the psychometric side, because I believe disc and sales together, when the 10x thing comes together, you're like the most unbelievable sales machine. So there are areas, and I kept it within the periphery, but I'm not going to become tomorrow a coach or a trainer in something completely unrelated where I don't feel I'm being genuine. And I think if there's one thing that the world of coaching, training, and speaking right now suffers from, is the fact that there's a big trust deficit. You just don't know who to trust.
So true. So, but I think it's much easier said than done, isn't it, Gaurav? Because, I have learned this aspect also from Dr. John D. Martinet, and he speaks about the aspect of finding your why as having an astronomical vision, where he says that the moment that, you being able to see that big North Star, where your energy is directed and you're getting up without feeling that you have to work because that's your North Star, is where you're actually working towards your astronomical vision. But I always say, and like the way that you said that you were following multiple things, and you have psychometric testing and you have sales and you have habits, but there are times when a whole lot of us do genuinely get all over the place, and especially when things are not moving correctly,
Sure.
then how do we find our why? I mean, how do we get the trust first in ourselves that is this my why really? I mean, is this the direction that I want to move into?
Yeah, and there will always be those kind of instances. There will be times, where we will be tested. And I believe at that time it's also very important to have, that inner circle who genuinely, cares for you. And this could be early mentors, this could be, people in your family, this could be people in your immediate, friend circle,
Mm.
people who will, kind of just let you know that, okay, maybe you're on the wrong track, maybe things haven't been how you think they ought to be. So perhaps so I think it's very, very important to have them, in terms of that inner circle is very, very important. It's hard to find your why, because sometimes you might think that this is my why, okay, and then you go down a particular path, and then circumstances might prove to you that, okay, this is perhaps not what I'm supposed to be doing. So, and maybe there's a course correction. I mean, it could happen, right? It happens for many. So even finding that North Star, or finding that why, even that could be, I'm not saying that you'll get right on the first shot. Like for me, it just happened. Okay, in the space of gifting, and someone said, "Oh, you built one of the best gifting companies. What was your aspiration then?" I'm like, there was no aspiration, dude. It was
Yeah.
desperation. I mean, if I didn't do what I did, I'd be on the road. So the point is, it was desperation that was driving me. It wasn't aspiration. Now, of course, that company is great. We just won Great Place to Work just day before yesterday. So big milestone for the team. But again, I think that sometimes it could be trial and error. You're not going to find it on the first shot. For me, I think on the training side, it was just fortunate. Like I said, things just aligned, and hence I found that purpose. And today, if someone did come and say, "Okay, GB, do you want to try something else?" Unlikely, right? I think this is what my calling will be.
Yeah, so I find this more like as connecting dots. And truly, even when I look at your profile, Gaurav, it really talks about if we need to find out the reason that we need to make an impact for, look at the direction that you start moving from the very beginning. And you spoke about that you were a part of BNI and becoming a part of a 5-minute presentation right in the beginning. And you may have not really aligned yourself to the real big goal then, but it
Absolutely.
started way back. I mean, because it was something that really, got your interest and got your time from you, something which is the most important resource today. So we need to just start connecting dots and how you've been able to align the expertise that you carried along with what you've been able to do there by today. So today, I think that you speak about the concept of 10x growth, right? So I'd like you to just share across a few important very interesting insights that you'd like to share with us, that in the training, speaking, and coaching industry, what do you think that you would want to advise for anybody to 10x their growth, if you'd like to put that down in a blueprint?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So interestingly, when people talk about 10x, a lot of times they think, oh, 10x our following, or 10x our sales, or 10x our revenue, or 10x, our lifestyle. So I think what's very important for people to understand that at first, the 10x is a mindset. Okay. And I mean, of course, you'd see like a 10x label,
Yeah.
on my label as well. And of course, the first thing to understand is the fact that 10x, as I mentioned, is a mindset. And what the 10x rule really states is that, assume you want to go from, let's say, point A to point B. Okay. And A might be, let's say, in terms of following or in terms of a certain amount of money that you make, and you want to go to point B, which is in terms of the kind of money you want to make. And I want you to think about all the action, all the activity, all the effort it will take to achieve that one thing. Okay. And, people think about it and they say, okay, I kind of have a good idea. I
Mhm.
said, do you think that seemed like a lot? And some would say, yeah, that seemed like quite a bit. And I'm like, okay, you know what the 10x rule states is that in reality, you will have to take 10 times, okay, 10 times the amount of action that you just thought. And it has to be consistent and it has to be massive. So 10
Mhm.
times the massive, consistent action of what you thought it would take to get you there is what's going to get you there. And then people are like, हमसे तो नहीं हो पाएगा, right? So that's the beauty of 10x. Okay, so whatever you decide to go ahead and do, okay, you have to put in that kind of consistent massive action. And that's why people fail, because they will take massive action, okay, but they'll do it in fits and busts. So they'll go out there and they'll, like Dhoni in the last over of cricket match, chauke chakke marenge. But when I'm like, you have to build your innings up like Rahul Dravid and a test match, and they're like, वो तो नहीं हो पाएगा. So, the point is that I think people kind of get overwhelmed. And again, when that overwhelm sets in, you again have to go back to the why. So hence there's a bit of a connection as well. But
Yeah.
just know this, that if you go down on this path to 10x, okay, it's going to be hard. People are going to call you, crazy. You're going to lose some friends. You're going to have to make some sacrifices, but eventually you will get there. But it is a process. It is a path.
Yeah, so I have, I think, most likely seen people, who've spoken about 10x growth like the way that you just spoke right now, and they don't say कि नहीं हो पाएगा. They say कि हो पाएगा, but then they don't do anything about it. So that's something that I always find, that your dreams are right there, what you really desire, but
Yeah.
what is the action that is, being undertaken? And, needless to say, we also fall into the same trap many a times. So I would have probably despised the idea of, shooting reels for a very, very long time. And the first time that I did it, I realized that it wasn't rocket science. And that's where you start to crack that, to even be able to 10x even one simple goal that you want to create for yourself, you need to first take the first action step and thereby be able to do it. So thank you so much. I think that was something which was an interesting insight, Gaurav, for sharing that with us. So would you like to share something that, how you interestingly bring out the elements, something that everybody is scared of, which is sales, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I have been training professionals day in and day out, and they say, sales nahi karni hai. I want to get into marketing. And I know that you come from this, complete domain where you train and you make them an expert in the same as well. What would you like to share as a quick insight that, how can somebody become an expert in sales and first of all, not be scared of it?
So true. And scared and being fearful of various things is obviously, key here. And like Ritik says in the Mountain Dew ad, like "Dar ke aage jeet hai." So yes, okay, it's good to know that you have this, this fear or the reservation. And I would say if the top few amongst why people don't want to pursue sales, and I've been going to colleges and I've been speaking, as a guest, visitor, and I've been asking kids, okay, how many of you want to consider sales? And almost no hand goes up.
No
No hand.
hands.
I mean, there's that Maitri, and I think there's 100 girls in the room. And I said, how many of you want to consider sales? And no hand went up. I'm like, okay. I said, how about if I told you that sales would also mean, convincing that boy, to maybe go out with you, letting your parents go out with you on a Saturday night, deciding to go for a meal with your friends and convincing them to eat what you want to eat and not what they want to eat. I said, that's all sales. I said, now how many of you think that sales is going to play a role in your life? Every hand went up. Okay, and I'm like, okay, so just the thing is, you have to just see it differently, because when I ask people, and especially youngsters today, I'm like, what's holding you back? And they're like, accountability. I'm like, okay, you will be held accountable in whatever profession you choose. Okay. The second one that comes up is rejection. I'm like, there will be rejection. Okay. There will be rejection in again, everything that you do. So again, it's just, if you run from it, which is going to be, you're just always going to be running. So accountability, rejection, and targets. So when I say that, okay, and yes, there will be targets, but there'll be targets if you get into HR, if you get into consulting, if you get into, I mean, whatever, even in marketing. The point is, even as a marketing professional, and today everyone's doing marketing because marketing is fashionable. Marketing is, getting people to connect with you on social media, etc., etc. But they also need to understand that with AI and what AI is doing, and we have so many friends who are in the space of video creation and all, they've been losing their jobs by the hundreds. Okay, and For the time being, sales is not going to be replaced by AI.
Yeah.
AI will assist in sales, but it's not going to replace sales anytime soon. So it's like a great career choice. Don't run from it. And if your things are rejection, if your things are accountability, if your things are targets, those things are going to happen anyways. So don't fear it. Again, just ask for help. Like if someone was, to have looking to, improve their skills or speaking, like glossophobia is as big a fear as death, right? If not more, they would come to you and they'd say that, okay, Gopika, help me get better at what I do. Similarly, I mean, I'm not saying come to the GBA. I mean, if you did, it'd be great. But the point is that there are a lot of people who can help you in this domain. We're all selling. Okay. When you're now appraisal time is coming, if you're going to speak to your bosses about, your appraisal, even that's a sale, right? When someone from HR is looking to bring people onto their organization and this person has an option of three or four other organizations to choose from, at that moment you're selling that candidate to come and join your organization. Sales is everywhere,
Yeah.
and perceived as marketing. So we have to know that sales and marketing are two sides of the same coin. Okay, so it's like heads and tails. I mean, they will go together. And Grant would always say, you can be the best, but if you're not the best known, it doesn't matter. So marketing will shine that spotlight on you. Marketing will get you that attention, but sales will also drive more revenue to get you that marketing dollars, and vice versa. So that would just be my thing. Don't fear it. डर के आगे जीत है.
Yeah, so interesting. I think a lot of insights there. And I know that I want to really delve deeper into it, but I want to find out one very interesting fact about sales here with you, Gaurav. So I've usually been able to find that when we're talking about sales, it's always about creating an influence, right? And when we're talking about influence, there is a terminology that we now use, which is influence through a hypnotic language, which means try and take over the complete set of emotions, what the other person is thinking, and then thereby create that influence. But having said that, of this sort of a technique,
Yeah.
doesn't that create a negative impression onto somebody who wants to learn sales? Because sales is all about manipulating your thoughts somewhere.
Okay, interesting. I won't think of that. Okay, and I come from a, let's just say, the thought being that sales is about giving, not about receiving. Okay, so you want to come out and you want to give the maximum. So if you take a certain type of salesperson, let's take Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street. Right now, here are guys, who ran cohorts which were called like the wolf pack. Okay, their psychology was called pump and dump. So almost like when they say ganje ko bhi kangi bech deta hai, right? So that kind of like selling ice to an Eskimo. So that
Mhm.
was one set of of salespeople, and what that did is that created a very negative connotation as well. Um, the school that I come from is more about, like I said, it's about giving, okay, not about receiving. Yes, once you give the maximum of yourself in terms of energy, in terms of attitude, in terms of options, obviously you will get back as well. If I was to ask you, okay, what are some of the core reasons that you actually go out there to make a purchase? In all likelihood, it'll be four things. I call them the apes. Okay,
Mhm.
A is appearance in terms of how does the product make you look, how does the product make you feel. Okay, so we have appearance. P is the performance. Okay, how does the product perform? How you're feeling about it. E is the economics, and I don't mean sasta sundar tikau, but economics means like value for what you paid. Okay,
Okay.
and S is safety and security. Like are people assured that it's not
Sure.
just gonna like run away after the sale is made, and there will be assurances later. So I think apes is key. I think when buying decisions are made, it's made because someone has a need, someone has a desire, someone has a problem they're looking for a solution for. Or, why does everyone buy Apple products? Because they fall in love. Of course, if you're an Android user, then you're in love with Android and you'll never leave, Android for Apple. So I think those are important things to actually note. That think about from the perspective of your consumer. Find out what is important to them. Like we always say, fact find. Okay, like fact find and figure out what is your buyer's DBM, which is their dominant buying motive. Which are those one, two triggers, amongst those four or five things we spoke about, which will push them over the edge. And I think when you come in from that perspective, it will no longer be about manipulating or the
Mhm.
hypnotism and all the things that you mentioned. I
Yeah.
think you'll be someone who will be appreciated by virtue of the genuineness that you bring to the table. And like I said, this is something that's lacking in the world today.
But that's exactly the point. I mean, the genuineness, I mean, everybody is creating genuine products. Their
Hmm.
services are fabulous. There is no doubt about it. But then why does it happen that they go through a series of guilt while they're going to try and present that in the form of a sales, and especially when they're mentioning the price.
It's interesting. It's interesting. And sometimes people could almost feel like and that's again, a space which I don't think I've been in much, because again, my perspective has been that, when I come in and present, I'm presenting for something which is actually twice the amount of money, or if not five times the amount of money I'm actually going to ask for.
Okay.
But there is this, thought in people's minds that I might be asking for too much.
Mhm.
And the reason why that thought also comes is because of a little bit of lack of confidence. If you're getting wins, okay, if your confidence is rising, if people are saying you're moving the needle and people are willing to pay what you're asking for and more, when you quote your price and they say bas itna, as in they're like, this is shocked that you're asking for so little, instead of bas itna, where they like collapse when they thought that you would actually be 10% of what you asked for. So it's a lot to do with confidence, and I think with time, and you'll see this. I mean, I'm sure when go back to some of the biggest names in the space of coaching, training, and speaking, there are times where they would probably struggle to get a few $100s for a seat. And today, when Grant Cardone is throwing a growth con which happens next month, $20,000 for a front row. I mean, there are times where $100 he wouldn't have got people, right? But it's just that it's again, it's marketing. It's about the results that are coming. It's about your own confidence growing. I think everyone in the space and everyone who's going to be listening in, my advice to them is um, set your price and don't be ashamed to ask for it and deliver
Mhm.
like twice the value or 10x the value that you actually do. So your audience should be saying, okay, wow, that was so good, and I can't wait to try this again or refer, my network to it. I think that will be core to your success. But it comes with confidence, comes with time, comes with perseverance. There's just been too many people who've, come and gone, and we see that all the time. Just stay the course, and eventually it will pay off.
Lovely. So stay on, and of course, with persistence, not only 2x, but being able to give value worth 10x, which is truly in the words of Gaurav. As you know, you would always want to quote everything which is to 10x your growth thereby as well. So, towards, we're moving in towards the end of the discussion, but something that I would want to align here is, so you had been practicing and you were doing something which was with consortium gifts. Today, of course, you're also into the space while doing that parallelly, which is speaking about sales and training people over the same as well. Have you been able to see that there has been a bounce back effect as well onto your own journey as an entrepreneur, and thereby you're being able to multiply that because you're training, because you're teaching others as well?
So again, we've fortunately done really well all through, and we've just been growing year on year in that business as well. I think what the training piece has done is that it has actually built far more credibility than for some of against some of our competition and our peers in the gifting space. See, the thing is, okay, and don't get me wrong here, but when you come in as the gift guy for an event, um, HR will be like, "Hi, yaar, wo carton, t-shirt, t-shirts ka chhod ke chale jana." So you're like, so drop the box and walk away, right?
Right.
That's what a gift guy does.
Right.
But as the, the let's say the keynote speaker, you're flying with the top management, you're having your meals with the managing director and the sales head and all of that. So you're perceived as someone very differently as well. And when you tell them, hey, I also have a gifting company, they're like, hey, you know what? They call the head of procurement and they say, start doing business with this person. So I think we've been able to piggyback both quite well. And again, it's like by nature, I'm a serial entrepreneur. So like while we already have three companies, there are going to be three more that are going to be coming up soon as well. And I just can't sit still. And again, my key is building great teams, empowering them, inspiring them, and letting them run and carry the ball forward. I do less than perhaps ever before at Consortium, yet we do bigger and better than ever before. And yeah, that's just been my mantra. So, and that's what I'd recommend to everyone. Like, focus on bringing on people into your team, even if it is someone to just start doing, the very basic tasks. Like, don't get stuck doing them yourself. Because when I met Grant Cardone and I said, okay, GC, what's the biggest mistake that you ever made? And he said, for 17 years, I was a solopreneur. I hadn't even started GBA. Okay, I called my EA and I said, start hiring for the GBA. And they're like, what's the GBA? I'm like, don't worry about it, start hiring. Okay. So I said, we're not going to make that same mistake that Grant Cardone made. And GC says this all the time. He says, and today, I mean, by many accounts, he's said to be a dollar billionaire himself. But he's like, if I hadn't been a solopreneur for 17 years, creating my own content, delivering my own content, making my own invoices, knocking on doors for prospecting, he said, I'd have been, 10 times of where I am today. So he says, it's just unfortunate that I didn't see that then. And I think the idea is to also learn from the mistakes of others and not make the same mistakes.
So nice. So wonderful. And apart from having, three different setups, you've also been able to get yourself into podcasting yourself. I think that in itself speaks about the journey that, you really want to share. So would you like to, share some details about the podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast started out with Smashed Bashed, Yet Not Dashed. So that was the first podcast, which is also supposed to be the title of a book, which hopefully one day will, find the light of day. There's Let's Chat with GB, which is, the current version of the podcast, which kind of the other one was becoming a little heavy. And there's a third podcast coming out, and that's going to be really cool. And that's going to be with my wife, and we call it the Love Roller Coaster. So
Oh,
that's going to be
lovely.
all about relationships. I love podcasting, as a medium. And I just think that people connect with that, and when I'm meeting people who've been, watching the podcast and listening to the podcast, they don't talk about consortium, they don't talk about the GBA, they don't talk about the other ventures. They say, तेरे podcast पे वो आया था यार, जो उसने बोला बड़ा अच्छा लगा. So that connection that's actually happening, it's just a great tool. I know it sometimes can be hard. I mean, congratulations, for yourself for taking, this step and creating, this series of podcasts as well. It's just amazing, and I think that it's something that again, people should experiment with. It's not necessarily it's going to be like a super hit. Initially it's going to take some time, but stay the course, and yeah, who knows where it could actually go.
Lovely. So that was really, really wonderful, Gaurav. I think I've had complete fun and, of course, taking away a lot of takeaways for myself as well. And I do hope that our viewers have also been able to really enjoy this. So thank you so much once again for being a part of this series.
Hey, thank you, and wishing you all the best, and keep inspiring and motivating all those who come into your ecosystem, and the world truly needs more people like yourself, so keep going out there and crushing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gaurav.
Awesome.